even those you can't get along with, to tune in so that they can be a part of this fantastic conversation. We'll also have an opportunity for you to ask questions as the conversation goes. So with that being said, let me do this first. Let me first introduce our title. This is a conversation that is of a series of conversations that is I guess the backdrop of it is 846. And 846 is 8 minutes and 46 seconds in which George Floyd was in Minnesota and a law enforcement person had his knee on his back, and he eventually succumbed to that and died. And so these conversations, based on what is going on in the community and what is going on in the world, we want not only just talk about it, but more importantly, we also want to provide solutions so that we can move forward, so that we can make ourselves better for ourselves, our family, and ultimately the community. So with that being said, let me first introduce who will be working on, for some of you, Dewan, you may know this, the Wheels of Steel, but it's a technical Wheels of Steel, and also our co-host and a co-sponsoring group or organization for this particular thing, and that is Ms. Emlyn Lee of Brave Communities. Emlyn, if you just come in for a second and share just very briefly a little bit about Brave Communities, and then also what our listening audience will be able to do as we move forward with this webinar.
Sure, thank you so much, Durs. Good evening, my name's Emlyn Lee. I'm the founder and chief community collaborator of Brave Communities. And so Brave is an acronym for Building Relationships, Awareness, Voices, and Engagement. And so we host regular community conversations to amplify the voices of those marginalized so that we can change the narrative. So I'm very pleased to be here with you all tonight. And thank you for all that are contributing to this wonderful, your lived experiences. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Emlyn. We'll also now go to our other co-host, and she has so many hats, but I'm just going to give 3 hats that she wears, and really the impetus for bringing this particular conversation together. The conversation we're going to start and talk about some things that are going on in the 3rd largest city in the country, which is Chicago, Illinois. We'll expand the conversation and talk about what's going on across the country, and then we'll come back and basically conclude with some solutions and some things that we can do right now as we speak. So before we introduce the panelists, I want to introduce our other co-host, or co-sponsor, I should say, Ms. Latrice Cook, who is the executive director and founder of MELG. She is also the president of Central Texas NANCH, Central Texas National Action Network, and just an overall good person. So Latrice will kind of give us a backdrop and the impetus for this whole conversation and you know, what sparked her to pull this together. Latrice?
Oh, thank you, Durs. Hopefully you all can hear me. I am Latrice Cook, as he just introduced me, and I am excited about this opportunity, and especially the illustrious panelists that we have with us. In 846 just is something that came to mind, and it is my hope that this series, with the request for immediate action, will keep, for each of those who watch this live or who watch it later, keep you charged to do something yourself to affect change. And as a person who is a founder for a nonprofit that works with people who have previously been incarcerated and their families, I am a resource provider for that population. And of course, with all that has happened and has been transpiring since the pandemic, I have just personally been just on the edge of just trying to figure out where we are really going as a country while we are still having people killed and murdered by police officers, and just the total mayhem that is going on in the midst of such a tremendous thing going on in the country, our pandemic. And these things are still happening. And so 846 is really key, because the whole world really changed based on the pandemic, because everything was at a standstill. And then this young man ended up getting killed by somebody having a foot in his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And it changed the world. And if I figure that if we can change the world perception in 8 minutes and 46 seconds, then we should be able to change some of the things that are bureaucratic hindrances to change for Black people. Thank you guys for being here. I really am, I'm glad you all are here. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Latrice, and we thank you for actually pulling the panel together. Tonight's panel will be, and we'll give each one of them introductions, but what we're going to be talking about this evening is not only what's going on around the country, but we're going to go and concentrate what's going on in what seems to be, for lack of better terms, a whipping, and I'm going to say a whipping boy, but a whipping city, and that is Chicago, Illinois. Whenever there is a question raised about what is taking place amongst brutality, whenever there is a question raised about how Black people are having things done to them in an unjust way, Chicago, Illinois seems to be the escape route or the back door in which people will use in giving an excuse on why certain things should not be given to Black people. So they'll immediately talk about what's taking place in Chicago in terms of the high murder rate. They'll talk about the poverty in Chicago. They'll talk about all those things that, as if because it's taking place in Chicago, there is justification for what they unjustly do elsewhere. Now, Chicago does have some things that perhaps they have to be dealt with, but we cannot, and it would be remiss of us not to talk about the positive things that Chicago, just to give a backdrop, but it's the third largest city in the country. It is a city known as the Big Shoulders. At one time, Chicago had more Black millionaires than any city in the country. Chicago is the home of many great Black activists for the community, from Jesse Jackson and Operation Push to Fred Hampton and Mark Clark, who were assassinated with the Black Panthers, to Reverend Ralph Sampson, of course, the Nation of Islam, and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, now the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, and other great men and women who come out of Chicago from the activist standpoint. Of course, we have great entertainers that have come out of Chicago, from Chaka Khan to nowadays you have Common and Kanye and quite a few. And of course, we can't also not forget the cultural things that come out of Chicago that we had. We know it was, they have some great sports. Well, they used to have some great sports teams, and I may get a little pushback on that. But the Chicago Bulls, whether you were for them or not, they changed actually the culture of way in people look at sports. People now still, whether they win or not, you got people who are Chicago Cubs fans. Chicago is again a great city. But with that being said, and that as a springboard, we still must address some of the things that are taking place there in Chicago, in which we see people utilizing that. So tonight's panelists will come and we'll raise some questions to them, and we'll see from those who are there in Chicago on the ground, and give us a real perspective, because oftentimes looking from the outside looking in, and then you can change the narrative to your particular favor. But we have persons that are there, born and raised in Chicago, and even Miss Cook, Latrice, is that she says she's from the wild 100s. I don't know what that means, but whatever that means, she's pretty excited about being from Chicago. So let me first go with our first panelist, and I'll introduce everyone, and then they'll say a little thing, and then we'll start with some questions. Our first panelist is our brother Damon Williams, who is the founder of the Let Us Breathe Collective. He is he's active, he's very active there in the different things that are taking place as far as moving towards justice for the community there. And we're glad to have brother on. Two questions before we kind of make an opening statement, Damon. How long have you been in Chicago?
I'm 27, well, I'll be 28 on Monday, but I'm born and raised on one thread of my tree. I think I'm about fourth generation Chicago, but me and both of my parents are born here on the south side of Chicago.
All right. So Damon, tell us a little bit about Let Us Breathe Collective, and then a little bit about, what we're talking about. And let me say this, and so all the panelists will know, we're going to be talking about the crime rate there in Chicago, whether it's real, perceived, or is it, what is going on with that? Because again, that is the thing that people continue to move at. Then we're going to expand our conversation and broaden it to the greater what's going on in the country. We want your take on that. And then we'll come back and conclude with some solutions and some things that we can all do to help and to assist in becoming better. Brother Damien.
For sure, for sure. So is that an intro to answer all those questions right now?
No, it's just kind of yeah.
So again, my name is Damon. I'm a co-founder of an organization called the Let Us Breathe Collective. Let Us Breathe is an alliance of artists, activists, organizers, educators, healers, practitioners, coming together to work towards transformative change, namely opposing structural oppression, racism, systemic violence, specifically carceral systems of militarism, namely police, prisons, jails. So we want to see a world without those systems, and an investment in the things that we need, namely shelter, food and nutrition, art space, education, restorative justice, mental health care at large, for all people, but particularly for Black people. The Let Us Breathe Collective was born out of the uprising in Ferguson 6 years ago, after very similar to what we see in response to George Floyd, the transformational response and uprising of Black people in the Ferguson area or the St. Louis greater area. And so from that experience, began doing resistance work and liberation-based work here in Chicago that looks like, one, working towards civic engagement, political engagement, trying to affect policy and government redistribution, but also as artists using social culture dynamics to facilitate space towards restorative and transformative communal relationships, because that's what we believe our vision of the world that we want. And that is our belief, is that we have what we need to create the world that we want, but we do define ourselves in a legacy and a liberatory tradition that is namely pushing for the abolition of violent systems. So similarly, as we saw the abolition of plantation and chattel slavery and Jim Crow apartheid, we believe that incarceration and mass incarceration is an oppressive, harmful system that is actually counterproductive and detrimental to resolving violence. And if we want to address violence, we actually have to be a little bit more creative and human-based and love-based in the systems that we're building.
Okay, thank you, Brother Dan. Appreciate that. So we got a man, 28 years, about to be 28 years, born and raised there in Chicago. Now let's go to Dr. Pierre Johnson. Dr. Johnson. There he goes. Oh, not Dr. J, Dr. Pepper, Dr. Pippin, Dr. Pierre Johnson.
Had questions, but then he stuck in a waiting room.
OBGYN there in Chicago. Dr. Johnson, let me ask you also, how long have you been in Chicago?
All my life. I mean, I was born and raised in Chicago. Other than schooling and training, I've been here my entire life.
Yes, sir. And you also have a nonprofit, Pulse of Perseverance. Just as a quick opening, Dr. Johnson, how do you feel about Chicago, and what are your sentiments basically for looking forward, if you will, to helping to address some of the things that are taking place there in Chicago?
I'm born, bred, raised, live, breathe, eat, Chicago. I love my city. I love being from this place. But yeah, there are issues, and these issues can be really easily explained and even more easily, to me, easily resolved, but maybe not to others. The true problem is not just a now problem. The light is being shined on the murders and the violence in Chicago. But if you look at the history, this has been happening since the 80s. Like, you got 500-600 murders that have been happening every summer. As soon as it gets warm out, like, this happens, all the time. And that is really by design. It is, if you do your history on not just Chicago, but the Great Migration from the South, you'll see how Blacks were segregated in these sectors of major metropolitan cities. The thing that makes Chicago a little bit different is really, this is where the advent of the projects happened. So, there was an extreme movement to keep the migrants from the South segregated and marginalized in particular areas, you know, which is where the project started. And with that being said, you know, you have people that, you know, have been given a lack of resources, have been given a fifth of the amount of money that it costs to educate those people, not given jobs, not given resources. And that is systemic, and that has been from, you know, back in 40s and 50s all the way to now. And the difference now is that, you know, you have, you know, when you have people that are in that particular sector, the violence is happening amongst that.
Right.
And you don't have the judicial system that's in place to hold individuals accountable for those things that are happening. And therefore it's not really, go ahead, what you say?
Yeah. Hold that point, because we're going to get peeled the onion back.
Okay. Well, you open up that can of worms. You don't want me to talk about it. Don't ask. Because I got to go all day with it, bro.
I got you, Doc. I got you. All right. We're going to get into that in a second. You've been looking at my notes, so I got that as part of one of our questions. All right.
No problem.
So thank you. So again, born and raised, you loved it, and I've seen your thing. I think you had a shirt that said in good words, I'm from Chicago, but it had a little bit more, a bit firmer conversation on that. All right, thank you. Let's go to our final panelist. Yes, sir. But Dewan Anderson, a native Chicagoan who has just moved just recently. He's now in the Austin area. He's a business person and an entrepreneur and the owner of a restaurant called Bahati's. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. But Dewan. Yes, but Dewan, how long were you, again, obviously born and raised before you moved to Texas?
Well, actually, I'm not born and raised in Chicago.
Okay.
Okay, I was born in Los Angeles. I was there for about 10 years. Then I moved to Chicago, and that's a different. It was a whole different concept, understanding the gangs in LA, and moving to Chicago with the gangs in Chicago because the structure was different, and that's a whole nother story. But I've been in Austin for probably about 4 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
The majority of your life and your formative years were there in Chicago, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Deeply rooted in Chicago, Southside Chicago, Wild Hundreds, from the low end to the Wild Hundreds. I've been there. I've been. You know what I'm saying? I used to be a police officer, so you know what I'm saying. I've been in the gang meetings. I've been in a lot of stuff in Chicago.
Yes, sir.
And you know what I'm saying. And I kind of understand both sides of the, you know, both sides of the plane where everybody's looking at. But there is a solution in my eyes. But that solution starts with the community.
Yes, sir. And we're going to get to that. So hold that point. So thank you. I'm going to thank all the panelists for their initial thing. So now let's go to some questions. Again, and some of the things that they again continue to want to use is Chicago as the reason for a lot of different things of why Black people are in the justification of why they do certain things to Black people. Now, the statistics say that Chicago has a very high murder rate, but when you look at the statistics, Chicago is not even in the top 30 per capita in terms of killings. Of course, with more persons, the numbers may be high, but the numbers in terms of per capita does not even put Chicago in the top 30. So my question is this, you know, first of all, the killings that we see, they are, or the murders that are being reported. Why is there such an emphasis on these particular murders? And two, what is it about, and Dr. Pierre, we'll go to you, and then we'll circle around and get back to Damon. What is it about the, and you mentioned it a second ago, Dewan, what is it about the killings that are taking place? Because in looking at the Chicago Tribune report that was just released on Sunday, September 13th, it says that the murder rate in Chicago for 2019 dropped to 13% from the previous year of 2018. But then this year, as we speak, there are currently 538 murders there in Chicago, with the majority of them being young black males. So, Dr. Johnson, you made mention of the projects and the things that take place. What is it about, and what is taking place with our young black males, especially when we cited the different activists, the different powerful churches, the different powerful organizations that seems to, they not listening to that particular thing and still going out and, according to the reports, killing one another? Or is that a bunch of yeast added to these particular reports? Dr. Johnson, and then we'll go to Damon, then we'll go to Dewan. We got Dr. Johnson on? Dr. Johnson. They got you muted.
No, I was answering a question in the chat.
Okay.
My bad.
Okay, yes, sir.
I didn't hear you. What did you say? I'm sorry.
So the question, Dr. Johnson, according to the Chicago Tribune report that I just recently read, and that was as of September 13th, it showed a decrease from 2018 to 2019 in the murder rate by 13%. But as of this September 13th of this year, the murder rate has increased there in Chicago, and it's on record pace to beat the 2016 numbers. That was approximately 756, with the majority of those being young black men. So these reports that we're reading, are they real, or is yeast added to them to kind of, again, trying to highlight that black people can't get along? They have a black administration in black city government, and they just can't handle it. Is those the reports that we're seeing, are they true, or is this thing just being added to for a bigger picture of what they do something down the road?
That it's a lot of the things that you read and a lot of the things that you see are they're misleading. Sometimes you'll hear, like 13 to 15% increases, or it's higher this year, what have you. But just think about it, like, what's 13% of 100 is 13, right? So when you have 600 or 700 people that are dying, you're looking at like 60, 70 people over that total number. It's still a ridiculously high number. So if you talk about this decrease or that decrease, that could be just from subtle things in the environment and weather. It's not, the number is consistent. The number has been consistent. Like if you look at that number, give or take 50 to 100, that number has been pretty static over the past 30 plus years. And again, that is just a microcosm of what happens here. And I'm a person that has lived it. My brother, my younger brother, was murdered on the streets of Chicago last year. And I had to go through the experience of what happens. And there is a misrepresentation of what happens, like in the media, right? Because like if we look at TV, like if you look at the first 48, for example, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the show, but basically there's a murder that happens, the police are called, and then they have 48 hours to find out who did it or get leads or what have you. Like you see the whole process of the heightened awareness of when a murder happens and how that goes down. Well, I lived it. Like my brother was shot in the middle of the street, and I may have talked to an officer at the hospital and maybe one other time after that, and they knew who killed them. They knew him. So it's not this heightened level of detective work, of trying to find out who killed or who's in charge or who's behind these murders. So therefore, there are no consequences. So these murders are going unchecked. You hear all the time, parks getting shot up, little kids getting hit. You hear like mass shootings. Like these murders are going unchecked. So when you have unchecked homicides and unchecked crimes, why would those numbers go down?
Right.
There's no repercussions for it. So,
Right.
but then you look on the same note, you'll see a famous star come here and basically beat up himself, and the city spends 6 figures trying to figure out why he beat himself up.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Yes, sir.
So why does that happen? That happens because that happened on the north side. That happened to where there was an affluent population, just like, with these last bit of riots that happened. When these young black kids, when they were looting the south side of Chicago, hands were up. It's just something that happened. They're rebelling, they're going against it or what have you. When they went downtown and they started going to the Gold Coast and to where the money matters, all systems go. We finding out, we looking at cameras, we doing all of this stuff to find out who did it. That's because it's impacting the dollar of Chicago. So when it impacts the dollar and the societal structure of Chicago, then the resources are there to, put the stop and make the consequences stick.
Yes, sir.
And that's why this stuff continues to perpetuate.
Okay.
We could talk, we could go deeper into why it's happening, why, these kids are shooting up. They have absolutely no hope. You have a public school education that has no funding, that has, so you got 16, 17-year-old kids that have absolutely no trade skills, have absolutely no aspirations for college or any jobs or anything productive in life. So little menial beefs mean a lot.
Yes, sir.
$50, $100, it means a ton, right? So I'll shoot you for $100. I'll shoot you for $150. And not only will I shoot you for it, I won't get caught for it. So I'll shoot your family up too. So if you have that structure that's in place and there's nothing to check it, it's going to continue to perpetuate. It doesn't matter that we have a black mayor. It doesn't matter that we have people speaking out about it. It doesn't matter that people are enraged. It doesn't matter that the president sent all these troops. All of that smoke and mirrors. Dealing with the actual structural makeup of what's happening in the city, and if you pay attention to it, it'll explain all of this and how to fix it.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. We'll get into that in a second. Damon.
Yes, sir.
Question for you. As an activist and as a person that's there on the ground, and you're seeing this particular, the media reports, et cetera, and then they want to use Chicago because when you are trying to talk about and pointing out the systemic racism and the things that taken place, how do you respond when they want to throw back in your face that you're talking about policemen killing this and the other, but you just had 60 murders over the weekend, and the south side is a war zone, and the west side is this, and the gangs are out of control. How do you juxtapose you going against the so-called system, and then the same people that we're all part of seem to be, tearing each other down? How do you deal with that, Damon?
Well, in real life, I usually don't respond because from my position, that's a disingenuous claim. And so if you are saying why would that be? I'm going to explain it. Because usually that is being brought up as a way to deflect or gaslight conversations about structural abuse, such as, Dr. Johnson was naming. So when we are talking about structural racism, oppression, state violence, police violence, then Chicago has become this conservative talking point. And so usually I only hear that from people who are not engaged in addressing the institutional issues or engage in any of the solutions. But how I respond to the logic or the arguments of such a thing is, one, like you said, I think it's also falsely reported in the sense that you know what, I'll even take a step back. Let me take a step back because the Chicago thing is not even really about Chicago. That's why you hear Chicago being spoken about in places that are all over the country. Like part of this event is because people in Texas talk about Chicago, and it's really a racist conservative talking point that has become the placeholder for black on black crime. And so black on black crime, we need to all know, is a political talking point. It's not a real thing. It's a theoretical claim that is birthed out of racism. So in the 60s and 70s, we had the height point of Black freedom movements, what we call civil rights movement, we call Black power movements. And that's when the articulation of white supremacy was reaching new levels of public platform. And the response to that is the crime or the violence that is experienced to Black people is not valid or is not of conversation because Black people do it to themselves. That's why it is framed as that, right? So anytime you are hearing someone say Black on Black crime, and it's unfortunate that actually a lot of Black people have internalized that language, that is not coming from a sincere place. That is coming from thought tanks and the Nixon administration and the Reagan administration, literally to promote racism and violence and to make sure that we are not investing in the solutions because we are investing in this austerity where all power and profit is going to corporations and government is subsidiaries to the elite, more or less. And so reason why Chicago is so prominent is because, like you said, we are the third largest city in the country, and we have a media base that is working for profit. So you name the Chicago Tribune, and I would say that that institution, that publication has proven time and time again to be racist in its reporting, and even the way that it is reported is dehumanizing. So the fact that violence or the loss of life is spoken about statistically is not a communal or human way to solve any of the problems. Black death is not a sports statistic, right? So going up 13% or 10 more this weekend than it was last weekend is not, to me, is a racist, desensitized way to look at what these conflicts are. Are these the BDs and the GDs on 63rd Street? Was this a domestic dispute? Did they go to school together? We are not talking about the structural nature that are causing these conflicts. And a lot of these conflicts are rooted in trauma because, before I even go any further, I feel like we need to take a pause or break. I just want to send my condolences and love to you, Dr. Johnson, to be so directly impacted by the crisis that is overlapping in our city. I just want to stop before I go further, political analysis, and offer my love and condolences. I've lost friends, I've lost family members. And
Sure.
So often the response is only, let's figure out what we're gonna do to make this look better in terms of political positioning. And usually that means an investment into violence. And so what also is not said in those conversations, and why I said it's disingenuous, is because it is often said as a response to, hey, the police are killing us, right? And so in Chicago, actually, over a 10-year span, there have been more police killings than in any other city by the Chicago Police Department. But anywhere in the country, if someone is saying, hey, the police should stop killing Black people, the response is going to be, go look at Chicago, you N-words need to shut up. And that, why I say it was disingenuous is because then they don't do their Googles to understand that of any major city, Chicago has the most police per capita. The Chicago Police Department is actually the most robust, and that is not evenly distributed. That is hyper concentrated on the south and west side of Chicago. So Black people in Chicago are actually the most police people in the country. And what I say is an overinvestment into policing, when you've closed down more in my lifetime since I've been coming of age, the largest school closing in the history of the United States happening in Chicago, the largest housing displacement in the history of the United States happened in Chicago. Half of our mental health facilities were closed down in Chicago. We have the highest racial concentration of Black poverty of any other place. There is no other city in the world where you just go miles and miles and miles and it's only Black communities, and those Black communities are mostly experiencing poverty or are in working class conditions. We've had some of the highest concentration of food deserts, or what we call a food apartheid, if we're being a little bit more politically accurate. So when you say we're not going to talk about the racism or the death of Black people because of Chicago, I say that is disingenuous because here in Chicago, we are experiencing the highest investment in policing. So usually what that, and I'll end here, usually what that phrase is saying is we're not listening to this movement that's saying we want to transform society and move away from violent forms of policing. We want more of that because that's what America is built on. America is built on militarized, violent, genocidal oppression of Black people. And we want to use Chicago as the testing ground or as the marketing point of that conservative and I would say fascist position. And what I offer back is if policing worked in the way that we say, Chicago would actually be the least violent city in America. And like the doctor said, in his own personal experiences, I've learned time and time again, having houses burglarized, seeing people die, is that this form actually leaves a vacuum of accountability and response, right? They may know or they may have information, but this system of judgment and punishment, and particularly people who are not from community with a militarized hierarchical position because they have a gun and a badge coming to respond to conflict that are rooted in community instead of giving us the resources to actually heal is disingenuous and is racism and is oppression. So when I hear people talking about Chicago and they're not actually involved in what's going on or talking about what's happening to the people in Chicago, I say it's disingenuous because it is a supporting of racism, very simply.
Right.
Chicago has become the talking point for racism.
Right.
And you can add healthcare to your very extensive list, your thorough list.
Yep. They're closing down during a pandemic. They're closing down Mercy Hospital right now.
Absolutely.
At the beginning of the pandemic, they closed down the public county facility. So we are, there's compounding crises that are happening here. And what I argue is those crises create trauma, and trauma create conflict, and conflict leads to violence.
Right.
And so violence is not going to solve it.
And that's why, right, no problem. And that's why the purpose of this conversation is because to talk to those who are actually there, not from a bird's eye view or helicopter view, but those who are actually on the ground and dealing with the actuality. And again, Dr. Johnson is not speaking from a vacuum when he's talking about what's taking place, with the loss of his brother and those things that are involved with that. It's just not, he's not just a statistic. It's not just another number that they have down at that they can add to the Chicago Tribune or add to the talking point, as you said, Damon, in regards to what the conservatives or others that want to use to justify and to deflect. Let me,
brother Durst, you can look at it like this too, man. Like you have all of these homicides. You just read off the statistics where all of these homicides, which we have, are concentrated in 2 areas of the town, just like Brother Williams was just saying, on the south and the west side, right? And then ask yourself, how many trauma centers are in there where you have all of these gun shootings?
Right. 0.
So you got kids that are getting shot in the arm, shot in the leg, that are dying from non-traumatic or non-lethal injuries. Like it's by design, man. It's crazy.
I have some questions that's going to really open this thing up, Doc, and you're going to be I'm going to start a particular question later in the conversation with you on this because you made mention of something and I want to deal with that. But I want to go to Brother Dewan. Brother Dewan, you made mention of coming to LA, and this is a perfect segue into my particular question I want to ask you. And that is, when you talked about and mentioned the gang, Chicago historically has had gangs there, but they've been very organized, from the Gangster Disciples to the Vice Lords to the Black Peace Stones, Four Corner Hustlers. But you had Larry Hoover and Jeff Fort, who not was just quote unquote gang members, but they were organizers. That's what I would like to look at it, and organizers of young men that perhaps dabbled into some things that from the outside looking in may have been, you may have thumbed your nose or you may have got frowned up about it, but you cannot minimize or dismiss, again, the impact of the Larry Hoover, Jeff Ford, and the others, and the gangs. But now it seems it's time to take a different slant to it. So, but Dewan, you made mention that coming from LA and the gangs there, with the Bloods, the Crips, and things, and also I make mention also of the Latin Kings there in Chicago. So very strong, organized groups of young men. But Dewan, what was coming from LA to Chicago, when you made mention of this, what was the difference that you saw, and what is now, do you think that they are, for lack of better terms, out of control, and this is where we're seeing this high rise of homicides? Again, because you're there, formerly there on the ground, you said you worked on both sides, or is it something else?
Well, let's start with the first question. Coming from LA, it was the gangs, it was block against block. So you could be a Crip on this block, but just because you're a Crip and you wear the same color on the next block, we don't get along, we bumping heads. And like Brother Williams said, sometimes, a lot of the times domestic, over girls, over, a lot of other things. But there's always a beef. That's how LA was. When I moved to Chicago, I understood, like you said, there was structure. There's actually laws that you have to follow, from hygiene to education. Them brothers actually put some thought into organizing these young men. I remember back growing up, I was in Motown, it's a part of Chicago. Prince Wakita would drive down the street, and all these little knucklehead kids out there in Blackstone, when he drove down the street, they stood at attention. There was nothing going on. When he spoke, they moved. You understand? And it's something to see how, like, Brother Farrakhan, the Honorable Mr. Farrakhan, when he speaks, how everybody moves and he has that control, and that's what he had. Larry Hoover, the same thing. And I think in 93, 94, when they took away all the gang leaders, that's when everything went straight downhill. So now the kids on the street don't have nobody to answer to, right? Because it used to be, my father was a cop. I had uncles that was a Chicago cop, and we had a store on 113th and Wentworth, right? And on 103rd and Corliss. It used to be, if there were any problems on the block, somebody out there fighting and shooting, my grandfather would go out there and talk to the gang leaders like, look, we're not having this on this block, before we called the police. There was no police involved. He would go talk to the, hey, look, you're not finna jump there, there's no raping, we're not having that on this block. You understand? And the gang leader had the control to the point where he could actually speak to them and look, no, you're not finna do that. See, now once you take that away, there's, to my understanding now, there's no, there's a bunch of sub gangs. You got your GDs, BDs, a lot of them hanging together, but they got their own little groups that they're forming. So now it's like LA, it's block against block. You know, but when they go to jail, they're structured. When they go to jail, they have to know the laws. They have to have meetings they have to attend. They're structured. And it's sad that when they go there, that's what happened. But out here on the streets, they're wilding out because there's no laws. There's nobody to answer to. And I believe that is like a very big problem when you don't have nobody to answer to, and they're out here just wilding. Now, like I said, there's no way to eradicate the gangs. I don't think so. You know what I'm saying? I don't care how many public playhouses, everything. There's going to be some form of group that's going to form, that's going to start out doing the right thing, and then might end up turning, like you said, dibble and dabble to some ungodly things. You know, right. But it's just these young men need activities. They need leadership. You know, you know what I'm saying? They need leadership. And they need something to like you said, believe in. I done had a bunch of family members killed all through Chicago. You know, I've been in shootouts myself on 122nd. You know what I'm saying? People shooting at us just because we going into the liquor store. You know, it's just, that was Chicago. Now, when like my brother Johnson said, Dr. Johnson said, when my brother got killed, and I was a police officer, I went to the police station, right? They talked to, like, what we gonna do about this, right? And I'm a police officer. Do you know they sat there and questioned me like I was part of the murder? And I'm like, wait, hold on. I need to know. So I had to contact my department to stay on that department to try to at least do more, because there is a lack of, I can't say all police departments, because all police departments are not the same. Every police force is different. You got some people who love that job. You know what I'm saying? To be a police officer, you gotta understand, to be a police officer, to get up every day and put your life on the line for people you don't know. It's like every day you walk out that door, you don't know if you're gonna die. You don't know if this is the last time you're gonna see your mama, your father, your kids, or anything. You putting yourself on the line for any phone call, any action that you have to take. And not only do you have to be a counselor, you have to be a domestic counselor, you gotta be, you know what I'm saying?
Referee, all that.
Referee, all that, right? And all that time, you holding all this responsibility of, like you say, trying to do the right thing. But the problem is, humans are flawed. Nobody's perfect. Every human is flawed. I don't care if I gave the most righteous preacher or the most righteous politician, at some point in time, if he has that flawed system in him, which we all do, he might not do the right thing. So go ahead.
No, but thank you, and because you actually lead into, and I think you mentioned structure. I remember the Minister Farrakhan talking about the fact that Reverend T.L. Barrett, a prominent pastor there in Chicago, his house got broken into. When they put the word out, the gang leaders or the person responsible, he got those persons who broke into that man's house, made them come back, return everything, and apologize. You know, so that's the control that you're talking about. But I want to now broaden it. Thank you. So I want to now broaden the conversation, and we're going to start with you, Brother Damon. And we want to broaden the conversation because you made mention about the police department. You made mention about policing our own community, or regulating things that are going on into our own community. And there's a conversation now that's talking about defunding the police. But before we even go into that, let's have a working definition. I just want, but then we're going to come back to you. But I want when you hear that word defunding the police, what that means to you, and then I want to follow that up with a specific question in regards to that. So this, as a working definition, Brother Damon, when you hear the term defunding police, what does that mean to you? In 1 minute, 1 minute or less, when you hear the term of defunding the police, because that's the mantra that's going out there right now.
It means redistributing power and resources away from a violent system and putting those resources and power into communal-based systems that are restorative and transformative. So it means taking money and power away from police departments.
Very good. Dr. Johnson, when you hear that term defunding police, what does that mean to you?
I mean, that's kind of mixed for me. It obviously means, taking extra resources away from police. But honestly, I don't think that is a viable solution. I think that it's putting a scapegoat out on the true problems of what's happening. Instead of defunding the police, how about we fund the educational system? How about we fund the resources? How about we look at spreading the resources and the tax dollars out proportionally throughout the city? That will answer our problems much more than taking funds away from the police. Because at the end of the day, all right, you take 100 cops off of the streets. What is that really going to do? Is that really going to stop police violence and brutality on Black people? No, it's not. Okay. But if you actually said take those funds and actually put them to use and put those funds to resources that they need to go to, then yeah, we could be talking about something. But for me, just taking the money away from the police as a form of like a punishment for them brutalizing Black people, I don't think is the answer.
Thank you. But Dewan, when you hear that term defunding the police, what does that mean to you?
The same, redistributing the funds, taking, like you said, actual money from them where they in need. Because like you said, if you minimize the police department, you are actually not helping. It's like a better suggestion would be like you said, who you vote for. And your vote, we got to put money out there to get these young kids and everybody get out there and vote to redistribute the funds to, like you said, maybe hospitals or playscapes for kids, other avenues that are going to help. But taking money away from the police department when they actually need more training, that's the thing. You're hiring a guy from Iowa and put him on 43rd, right? He's never been there. That's a culture shock, right? But just because he was able to pass the police department test and you know what I'm saying, be physical, whatever, you gave him that job, right? So to me, it would be more feasible because if you redistribute these funds, I'll pose this question to you. If you redistribute the funds and you minimize the police department, right? And I've been on these calls, and this is the reason why I pose this question. If I've been on these calls, so if you get a counselor to come answer a call of a homeless person that's suffering from mental issues, right? A call that the police officer would normally show up to, but you call a counselor to do it, right? The counselor shows up, right? His life is in danger because you don't know what's going on. He's not trained, from my knowledge, of any combat, any verbal judo, anything that the police is trained to do. Don't get me wrong, all police don't do the right thing. And I like to say everybody's flawed.
Hold that point, because you made your point in terms of the redistribution, and this is going to go into actually leading into my next question, which I want Damon to deal with. But I want to commend each and every one of you, because the defunding of the police, as defined initially by Damon, that's really what is being said when they talk about defund. But when it's out there, it's a dog whistle to others and to the ignorant, if you will, of the masses, that they're talking about dismantling and getting rid of police. But that's not what defunding the police is. It is exactly what each one of you said, and that is taking funds and redistributing them to the different areas in which it can be utilized in real time, in quick, fast, and early. So with that being said, Damon, let me ask you this. With this defunding, now you got the magic wand, and the money and the resources are in your particular possession. But even backing up, why aren't these particular groups who are doing the things that are on the ground, such as yourself, such as Father Flager, such as the other groups there in Chicago? How come, in seeing with no resources, there's impact being made? How come there's not being monies channeled to you to do that? With this defunding and again the proper definition that you gave, how come they don't see a way to do that? If it's $100,000, using this as a figure, working figure, if it's $100,000 given to the Chicago Police Department, and instead of buying a tank, they could take $20,000 and give it to the groups. How come they don't do that, and they just want to insist on buying the tank?
To answer that last part of the question, I would say because of capitalism, or more explicitly racial capitalism and imperialism. We are a society built off economic dominance and inequality, political exploitation, and that has been substantiated with violence. And so I think part of understanding what happens in our cities means we have to understand what's happening globally. And so the same way we are invading countries and occupying territory in the Middle East and in South America and destroying communities is the same thing that we do domestically with these domestic militaries. And so I do want to give a little bit more of definition and just make sure I name that I am part of the steering committee for defund CPD here locally. And I have been involved with connected to the Movement for Black Lives for the last 5 years. And so, of this demand being uplifted. And so it's funny because there is this discomfort that people hear because usually they're hearing it through media or seeing it through people just talking on Twitter and aren't actually connected to like the organized space. So as we saw in that conversation, there was like I don't think we should do that, but also like a description of exactly what we're calling for, of redistributing resources to the communal institutions that we need. And so the demand was originally in the more like verbose form, phrased as divest, invest. So divest from systems of violence and then invest into community needs. And then my position is that the investment into those needs will actually create the infrastructure for new systems of response and accountability, similar to what Brother Dewan was naming. And so just to get us into one understanding, because I think I don't want us to condense it here, I am an abolitionist. And so I want to say what that means, because defunding the police is really a transitional step to let's transform our society and build stronger communities and build new systems. So first, we need to just all acknowledge, I'm going to assume there's a lot of Black people watching, but I'm just going to assume everybody here watching is an American citizen. And let's just like ground ourselves a little bit in like structure and like real fact, and then also talk philosophically about it. Our 13th Amendment says slavery shall not exist slavery shall not exist in the United States except for punishment of a crime. So that comma in the word except means that every time a police officer successfully does his job, no matter what harmful thing was done, and then a judge slams the gavel and sends them to incarceration, that is legally, constitutionally based slavery. I have had family members incarcerated. Most Black people are 1 degree away from incarceration, if not experienced it themselves. And my claim is horrible things are happening, and slavery is not the answer. So what I want every person to do is just take a deep breath and recognize that every time you've drawn breath on this land, slavery has still been existing. And so the answer is not do nothing, but the answer is slavery, torture, and genocidal efforts, because the prison system comes out of warfare and comes out of domination. And the fact that we are experiencing, millions of people being incarcerated and then coming back into our communities, like the brother said, that, folks are going into jails. Cook County Jail is the largest mental health facility in the country. Folks are going into jails and getting organized instead of being organized in their communities. Folks are going to jail to find education or to find trade skills instead of finding those things in our communities. And what I'm saying is, if we had better responses that were, one, first of all, restorative, we can actually move beyond this system. And so when we say defund the police, one, we need to acknowledge that all forms of actual services have been defunded in our lifetime. So schools have been defunded, hospitals have been defunded, parks have been defunded, libraries have been defunded, but the investment in policing has gone up. So my argument is that it's actually not a social service, it's about political dominance. So here in Chicago, and just about in every major city, usually it's between 37 to 42%, 40% of our city budget goes to the Chicago Police Department. That's a little bit more than $1.2 billion a year. That's about $5 million a day. And my argument is, it's not a punishment just because they're bad racists, even though I think it is a racist institution. But it's not to take away because we don't like them. It is saying that this system is ineffective, violent, and actually counterproductive on a collective level. The collection of incarceration, I think, is actually more harmful than the collection of crime that they are responding to. And if we took that $5 million a day in Chicago, we could actually have healthy solutions, right? So when you say there are all these activists, all these community-based organizations, I think of Rage, I think of Grow Greater Inglewood, I think of Sweetwater Foundation, the Let Us Breathe Collective, and the Breathing Room. I think of Circles and Ciphers. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of organizations that on a day-to-day basis have bare bones resources and are working to create new systems. But the investment into policing, I think, is a part of white supremacist American dominance. And we have invested into that notion as our people, ourselves, particularly because most of the responses is from this displacement that's been happening in Chicago. So like we named, Chicago is the most segregated city in the country. The South African apartheid government came to Chicago to learn redlining, to learn how to segregate the apartheid society of South Africa. And that system that was abolished in South Africa still exists in Chicago. So,
that's right.
So the way that this concentration is happening, and then you send 18 to 20,000 folks with guns and chains on their waist as a solution, I think actually makes the problem worse. And so, like we said, if that gun and that affirmation of violence is actually a flattening of 100 jobs. So it's actually, in another sense, a jobs program. So instead of having one cop, we should have domestic violence response. Instead of having one cop, we should have folks that are responding to addiction and drug overdose. We should have mental health facilities. We should have sexual violence responses. It should be something separate for commercial disputes or something happening in a store. It should be something separate for happening in traffic. We need a robust social system of new responses. So I'm not saying abolish 911. I'm not saying abolish response to conflict. I'm not saying that there should not be consequence, but I'm saying in carceral policing and punishment-based justice that our judicial system is calling justice, of prisons and jails and surveillance does not work, and it actually harms our people and actually perpetuates violence because it is itself violence. It is torture, it is sexual assault, it is a psychological deprivation and maldevelopment to the body, to the emotional processing system. And if you keep doing that by the tens and tens of thousands, if you send home 10,000 tortured people to a community, that's not going to create health.
That's going to be a problem.
It's going to create violence. It's going to create chaos. So when we say defund the police, we are saying stop investing into slavery, stop investing into warfare, invest into our communities, and we'll actually have better outcomes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
But can I please jump in? Because I have just got, I know our panelists, you guys, all of you all are you're phenomenal, just phenomenal. I just have to say something, because when we talk about defunding the police and putting the money back into the communities, as a person that's a resource provider in Texas, in Austin, where the prison system is just unbelievable, uncouth, and definitely filled with more Black people than it should be. When you defund the police and then you get those monies and you distribute those monies to Black gatekeeper kept nonprofit organizations and organizations that have been handpicked and cherry-picked and accepted by the white regime, how is that better? I'm always concerned, because when money is available, first of all, it's given to us in small pieces, because there's no trust in Black people running and operating any type of entities. We still are untrusted, and many Black people that are that are given the opportunity, that rise to the occasion, then become bought and paid for and sell the whole idealism out. They lose their fervor to be committed to the marginalized community. So I just don't want to lose. I mean, I'm seeing this with my own eyes in this city. And I'm watching the groups fight because they were successful at the council level in getting the police department defunded. And so although I hear everything and I'm in agreement, what about that aspect of our people that lose their commitment to really work in concert, if you will, with the police to provide those services, and it's so many aspects of this conversation, and I feel like we will never get through it. We won't. But I just needed to throw that out there.
Well, thank you, Latrice. And let me, because we want to make sure that in everyone's comments are highly, highly appreciated. We want to go and start moving towards our conclusion. But I will say this, that this is just the tip of the iceberg. And so we have some other things that we definitely have to come back. And if you're just joining us, we're talking about what's taking place there in Chicago, and we're also talking about on the broader perspective of what's happening around the country. And Chicago is, again, as we stated before, because it has been used as the rationale or the reason on why certain things aren't done, because they are painting Chicago in a certain picture, in a certain light. But we have Chicagoans that are here that are saying, yes, there are some problems, but there are some things behind those things that they're stating, and it's not all what you see. Dr. Johnson, I want to come to you, and I'm about to put the aluminum hat on, and then Brother Dewan, we're going to start our conclusion with you with the question. But Dr. Johnson, are you familiar with the movie? This is actually 3 of them now, called Purge. Are you familiar with that? Purge. Yes. That was the movie.
Yes. Did you
see the second one in particular?
Yeah, I did see the second one.
Okay. Now this my lunar hat, and I think you're the perfect person, because you actually mentioned it earlier, where people are getting shot in the arms and the extremities and dying. But I'm a fan of the late great Dick Gregory. And Dick Gregory's thing is saying, and this kind of links to what we're talking about. He's saying that, there are some things going on and there are some killings taking place in Chicago. But a lot of that is not killings that are and homicides that are being done by some of these so-called, some of these youngsters. That's how he phrased it. He said that it is a bigger picture involved with harvesting of organs. He said it's a bigger picture involved of, you see a high rate of young black men in the early 20s and whatnot with strong hearts, strong kidneys, strong, all these internal organs that others that are weak need. And there's nothing stronger than, again, that the black man physically, and you probably know that, but then you talking about an 80-year-old who needs a heart, what better heart to get than from a 23-year-old robust young black man? With that being said, do you think that there's something to that there is more involved than just somebody having a beef with somebody and then somebody getting shot? And then if they are getting shot, when they get down to the hospital, there's a little bit more sinister things involved in terms of what Mr. Gregory, Brother Dick said in regards to this harvesting of organs. Or is that far-fetched?
I mean, it would sound good, but in reality, I don't see that that's feasible. Because what happens is when these young black kids, they go down and they get shot, there's that's it. And a lot of the times, if you don't have the consent of organ donation, which they don't have, you can't utilize it, and the families are not going to allow them to do that anyway. They want every life-saving measure to be done, which is going to happen, and they're not going to be able to harvest their organs. You only have, it's a very finite window that you have to be able to harvest someone's organs. It has to be a very strategic plan in place. And oftentimes, you know, like for instance, in the case of my brother who was taken to Roseland, you know, by the time you get to him, his organs are done. You know, you don't even have centers on the South Side to actually facilitate organ harvesting. So no, I don't feel that, at least in Chicago, that that's a viable thing. I do feel that, you know, more so it's a problem that is impacting a group or a community that really doesn't matter to the powers that be, which is more importantly why it's happening. You know, if you got young Black kids killing young Black kids, it's just, you know, that's not, who cares? Who cares? Why do I care for a young 19-year-old who has absolutely no promise for the future, that's not being a productive citizen, kills another 19-year-old that's just like him? Why do I need to put a structure in place to stop that? It's nothing, you know. And then just to backtrack on what Brother Williams was talking about, just to add to what he was talking about, does anybody know, you know, how they're funding, or how they kind of figure out the funding for our prison systems? Anybody?
Yeah, well, yeah.
It's third grade test scores.
Third grade and fourth grade test scores.
Third grade test scores. So with that being said, you know, if you go up to the north side and you look at, you know, their third grade and fourth grade test scores, if they started to plummet, you watch how the resources would pour into figuring out how to make those kids improve. Third and fourth grade test scores on the south side of Chicago have been in the basement mezzanine for 30, 40, 50 years, right? And there has, and just like he was saying, that there have been how many high schools closed, how many grammar schools that have closed, you know, on the south side of Chicago. You see the problem. You identify the test scores, and all of these things are problems that these kids don't have a viable future. But instead of pouring money into that to rectify the true issue, you pour money into the jails. You're not dealing with the problem. You're waiting for, you know, the problem to manifest to deal with it. So that's straying off your point, but no, I don't feel that there's a mass exodus to watch Black men die for their organs, because there's no infrastructure in place to harvest their organs to shuttle them off to people that need them.
All right, thank you. And I mentioned that purge, but in that second purge, the guys said that they weren't killing people fast enough, so we had to do it. But that's another subject for another time. So let me wind this down with the conclusion. If you will. First of all, again, thank you for the outstanding conversation and dialogue. We want to, again, let everyone know that they have an opportunity to, again, get on these last few minutes, but tell your friends, your family, and again, even though you may not get along with, to come in and to hear, especially with this notion that you know, Black men just all we want to do is sit in the barbershop and talk about sports and talk about females, et cetera, et cetera. But this is a topic and a conversation that I think has been articulated very well. We're going to start winding this down with the question. We'll start with you, Brother Dewan. We'll end up with, we'll go to Brother Damon, and then we'll end it up with you, Doc. If that's okay, okay? So, Brother Dewan, this is your question. And each of you are going to have the same question, and then at the end of your answer, if you would, please give us your contact information, where you are, and then any concluding statement that you would have. So, Brother Dewan, here's your question. I'm a 25-year-old Black man, and I now want to relocate. And I have a choice between Atlanta and Chicago. Tell me why I should move to Chicago. I'm looking at these statistics. I got all these things in front of me. You know, that I've looked at Spike Lee's movie Chirac. I'm hearing about all this sort of thing. Why, with all that, should I move to Chicago, or should I move to Chicago? And then give us a closing statement. So you now have the opportunity, because you're now over the convention and marketing, but whatever they call that thing when they're trying to get people to come into the city. You now have that floor, Dewan. Why should I, as a 24-year-old Black man, come to Chicago as opposed to any other city, in this case, Atlanta?
Okay. Well, first of all, Chicago is a great city. Despite what you see on the news and hear about in the paper, it's a lovely city. There's nothing like Chicago. There's no other city in the world like Chicago in the summertime. And I can honestly say that. No other city in the world. As far as experience, family, I mean, there's a little racism in it, but if you want to come there, be a part of the solution. Don't listen to the problem. Any backdrop that you had about Chicago, if you feel that you can help, there's many resources that you can go to assist and help better in the community. As a black man, as a man, period, whatever you want to do. So Chicago, there's nothing like the Chicago sports. Chicago Bears fans are the best. The Bulls used to be the best, but you know they going through a rough time. But Black Hawks, you got Black Hawk, and there's nothing like 4 seasons. And see here in Austin, we don't get 4 seasons. Out there in Chicago, yeah, you get to wear your big jacket, your spring jacket. You can wear whatever. So Chicago is a lovely place. Go there. I mean, there's great opportunity there. And like I say, if you're going there, just be a part of the solution. Okay?
Yes, sir. Give us the name of your restaurant and how, if we're in Austin, how can we go visit your restaurant, Brother Dewan?
Okay, it's in Pflugerville, Texas. It's called Bahati's Chicken and Lounge. What it is Chicago style chicken. My family owns a couple Harold's Chickens out there in Chicago. So if y'all want to go get some Harold's chicken in Chicago, y'all go in there and get them. He owns one downtown. Got one on the north side, one in I believe Joliet. You know, so and he's one down this Grove. I got family everywhere out there. So like I say, you can reach me at 903105. Go get some Harold's. I see Brother Pierre Johnson out there in Ingalls. He used to have a Harold's right around the corner on 147. He used to own that one over there. So they shut that one down, but he was over there in that area. But
I stay in the hospital, my brother.
you can still get it delivered.
Brother Damon, I'm a 24-year-old black man. I'm debating on whether to go to Atlanta or Chicago. Why should I come to Chicago, Brother Damon?
You know, I would say if you have any interest in organizing your people, Chicago has been for the last 100 years, in many ways, the political capital of Black America.
That's true.
And so, you know, there are ways, there are ways in which we have one of the most corrupt cities and systems. I think over the last 30 or 40 years, a quarter of our city council members or alder people have been indicted or sent to jail for fraud or for other crimes, right? So like the Chicago machine is real, but my belief is often in the spaces where there are the most contradictions, you see the best solutions as well. And so the movement here, the cultural movement. So if you're interested in arts and poetics and in painting and photography, there's a really vibrant art scene here. Also, movement. So we mentioned the example of like there not being trauma centers on the South Side. There was one reopened at the University of Chicago, and that's because young Black women who I organized with for 3 to 4 years built a campaign after one of their friends died in the ambulance 5 minutes away from where a trauma center used to be. And so there's examples like that. There's examples of fighting to open schools. There's examples of people making the world that we want here. I think very similar to Detroit, you're seeing this counter communal like movement of building a new society. And so if you want to be a part of building a world for Black people in America, Black people globally, Chicago in many ways is the headquarters of that. And I'll also say to like the concerns about the public violence, right? The death in the street. Also, we need to be conscious of what that is and be sensitive to it. Black people are not a monolith. So in Chicago, we have one of the largest Black populations, and like you started, like there is a Black elite in Chicago. There is a spread of experience. I was privately educated my whole life as a South Sider of Chicago. So also we need to have sensitivity to our class position. I think when you're talking about moving, so if somebody who has a choice to move between different cities, they probably are in a higher position than the folks who are experiencing the concentrated poverty and trauma where the violence is occurring. Most of the places where the violence, like 90% overlapping with the communities that were displaced from the projects of the public housing system that was designed in such a horrible racist way. So a lot of the things that you were hearing about Chicago is like what you're hearing about every hood that you hear everywhere. So if you go to Atlanta, there is a hood where it's not going well, and there is a lead. If you go to New York, if you go to LA, if you go to Miami, there is a spectrum of experience. So a lot of times there's a lot of elitism and how we look at Black space, to not recognize that there's a lot of place to go. You can also go live in the North Side, right? Like there's a whole, like, it's a really money city, and it's beautiful. But here is, to be succinct or re-answer your question, here is one of the best places to do the work. But you might get a little bit more bang for your buck for the land in Atlanta, I can't lie. But everything else we got going.
How do we get in
and we got
contact?
Mild Sauce. Shout out to DeWine. You taking the brand global, you know, as a Mild Sauce advocate. That's probably the #1 reason to come to Chicago for what we do to our chicken.
But David, how do we get in contact with you?
You can follow me on all platforms, Instagram and Twitter. I'm at Damon_AF. You can follow the Let Us Breathe Collective, Let Us Breathe 773, to see a lot of the movement work. You can also follow a new space that we're building called the Black Abolitionist Network, to figure out about the campaign organizing we're doing and how do we create new solutions. And that's
okay.
me.
Thank you, Damon. Appreciate it.
Also, I do a podcast. I'm sorry, I do a podcast where I talk to, if you want to learn about Chicago, it's a show, I should have thought about this in the beginning, called Ergo, Up in the Air, in the Go. It's a podcast. We got almost like 260 episodes of talking to different organizers, artists, movement folks, educators. And so that's spelled AIRGO. You can look that up at Ergo Radio on every platform. If you really want to know more about these ideas or what's going on in Chicago, it's probably like the premier source to find out the documentation of what's happening in the movement.
Okay. Thank you, brother. And Dr. Johnson, we'll conclude with you in regards to that same question, brother. You know, I'm 23, so I'm thinking about going to Chicago. As a matter of fact, Dr. Johnson, I'm thinking about pledging too, Dr. Johnson. I'm thinking about pledging. What should I pledge when I go to Chicago if I have to want to go and get in one of the Divine Nine?
Yeah. Number one, my answer probably isn't going to be popular, but I'm gonna tell you like this: if you're 23 years old and you don't have a plan and you don't have a pathway for yourself, don't come here. Like, go to Atlanta. You better off in Atlanta. Like, this is, you know, like we just been talking about. We just had this whole conversation about the infrastructure and everything that's in Chicago. This is the place for, if you have a plan and you're trying to make things better, or if you have a plan and you're trying to navigate and have a structure of what you're trying to do. This is not the place to come and say, hey, I just want to kind of open up shop and navigate and see what this not that place. Maybe it may be in our lifetime, hopefully sometime, but in today's time, a 23-year-old that's just trying to find their way, go to Atlanta, don't come here. But if you have a plan to, make communities better and to make your mark as far as socialism and community activism and those things, then yeah, absolutely, Chicago is the place for you. You know, I love my city. Born and raised. I live and breathe here. You know, I'm everything Chicago. I got it tattooed on my arm. I got everything. Like, I'm Chicago all the way. However, you know, I'm speaking as a professional. I'm speaking as someone that has like the highest degree that degrees have to offer. Is board certified, that has my lane, that if everything turns to, you know, whatever, COVID, no matter what, I'm pretty Teflon as far as that's concerned. So I can't tell somebody that does not have those things in front of them that this is the best place to be in. So I would have to be very honest and transparent about that. Not to say that I love my city any less, but that's just the truth of the matter.
That is real.
And even as a professional, I'm here because I love it. But I don't really, if it wasn't for my kids and my family, I wouldn't be here either. You know, I would be very honest and transparent. I would make way more money if I was to go down to Atlanta, or if I was to go down to Louisiana. I'd probably make double what I'm making, or even triple in some places.
Yes, sir.
But I'm here because I love it and I want to make a change and a difference. I'm here, in my hospital that I'm in, because this is what God called me to do. But if I looked out for self, this wouldn't be the place. As far as pledging, do it in undergrad, man. Like, if you ain't got it by undergrad, bro, just let it go, man. That's what I say. I got friends that do it late. God bless them. I couldn't do it. I did it when I was 20 years old. If I'm a 40-year-old man, a 35, even 23, 24, man, I'll figure something else out. But You want to be,
Doc,
you want to be a few.
how can we get in contact? Because you're doing some fantastic thing with your nonprofit, Pulse Perseverance. Is that what it is, brother?
Yeah, that's one of them, man. I got a million hats, but to keep in contact with me, Dr. P23, spell out Dr. DOCTOR P23. That's in all platforms. That's Instagram, Twitter, Facebook is Pierre Johnson MD. LinkedIn is also Pierre Johnson MD or Dr. Pierre Johnson. Also, you know, my podcast that I've been brewing for forever is coming out. So that's Doc for the Streets, DOC for DASTRRETZ. So that's going to be the podcast, and the website is up with the landing page, which is www.docforthestreets.com. My non-for-profit is that Pulse of Perseverance, 3 Black doctors on our journey to success. We give out a monthly scholarship, and we also are developing a mentoring app to just pave the pathway for just young Black and brown men and women to get into these spaces of success, because you know what's portrayed in the media is a false narrative and goals that are placed in front of our kids like dangling carrots that they can't achieve. You know, everybody's not going to be a LeBron, everybody's not going to be a Beyonce, but that's all they see on TV, and that's what they're inspired to be, and they fall short of that goal, and they don't see any of the other goals that they can actually attain and control in front of them. So that's our focus and our mission, showing them the pathways to success, not just being doctors, but being lawyers, engineers, principals, educators, counselors, and everything else that will enhance and heighten our community. So, you know, that's www.pulse, P-U-L-S-E, of P3.com. And, you know, it's, you know, our book is on Amazon. It is really, has done well. We've been on pretty much every major platform from the Today Show, the ABC World News, to Steve Harvey Show, Windy City Live, all of these platforms. And it's, you know, it's been a blessing. Like we've taken the book and 100% of our proceeds go to scholarships. And all of our proceeds have been working on this app that we're trying to give to the world really soon. And we're in the beta testing phases right now. So, you know, check that out, support, donate. Again, it's not going to doctors' pockets. It's going to our future leaders of tomorrow to make this a better place.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you, brother. And thank all of you, Brother Damon, Brother Dewan, Dr. Pierre. Thank each and every one of you, brother. Thank you not only for your comments, thank you not only for your responses, but thank you for just even being a reflection, a modeling behavior in which our young brothers can be able to aspire to. We have an entrepreneur, we have an activist, we have a professional, but all of you are Black men who are concerned about helping the community. And that in and of itself, I pray that whatever you want to do in the future, that God continues to bless you with more and more abundance and prosperity. So thank you, brothers, and thank you, and we appreciate your time, which is the most important thing that you can give us, is your time. So we thank you for that. Again, we want to thank our hosts, Ms. Emily Lee of Brave Communities, and we want to thank the impetus for this, and we want her to have the last word. Latrice of the Central Land, and again from Milge. Latrice, can you come on?
Yeah, so anyway, I just want to say, I have to say this to Pierre because he has on Ingalls, and I was born in that hospital in Markham. I was born there 57 years ago. And so,
no, Latrice, not 57, no.
57 years ago, I was born there. So,
Black don't crack.
I don't know about all of that. But I will tell you, you all have been a phenomenal panel. I mean, I am in awe of the knowledge and the strength that you all have as Black men. And I want to thank you so much for agreeing to do this. And Pierre, specifically to you, I know you have a lot of hats in the air. You do a lot of things within the community because of your position. And he had really made all kind of different concessions to be here. And I just want to thank you all. Thank you for that. And Dewan too. Just, you know, it's in all of you all. Thanks. And Durst, I appreciate you very much for wonderful moderation. You did a great job. And to Emlyn Lee, who is really the backdrop of all of this, helping us put this together. Prison is what my top interest is to see the system become better if it can, and to make sure that we are engaged in trying to really make a difference. These conversations, I don't want them to just be conversations. I want people to really go away from here thinking about everything that you all have presented tonight and how it is effective in the communities in which we live. And so I just want to thank you all for this and ask you to be on the lookout for that call again soon. And shout out to KZI Radio. I am a radio talk show host for the Iron Sharpens Iron show on Thursday morning at 9 a.m. And I just want to give a shout out to KZI. And that's it. Thank you all for doing it. Shout out to the Shy 312.
Well, again, brothers and sisters, this is being recorded, so if you didn't have an opportunity to catch it from the beginning, go back if you can catch it from the beginning and hear again this fantastic dialogue and conversation on a myriad of topics, but I think topics that are not only timely, but I think the responses that I think that we'll all be able to learn from and to benefit ourselves. So with that being said, may you have a good morning, night, or afternoon, wherever you may be, and just be good to each other. Peace.
Much love.